A millionaire, confident and powerful, parades a stunning young mistress at the city's most exclusive charity ball. He believed his secret was safe, his control absolute. But in one single breathtaking moment, his entire world shattered. His wife wasn't home crying, as he expected. She was here, and she wasn't alone. What happened next in that ballroom became the talk of the city. But the real story is one they never saw coming. This isn't just a tale of revenge. It's a story of a woman finding her strength and a man losing everything he took for granted. Welcome back to Everyday Resilience, where we bring you stories of incredible strength found in the most unexpected places. Before we dive into this emotional roller coaster, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. Lucas Thorne, 48, stood near the center of the room, a glass of vintage bourbon in his hand. He looked every bit the successful real estate mogul he was. Tailored tuxedo, silver-streaked hair perfectly styled, an air of invincibility surrounding him. On his arm was Chloe, a woman 20 years his junior, her laughter a touch too loud, her dress a touch too sparkling for the subdued elegance of the event. She clung to him, drinking in the envious glances. "Relax, darling," Lucas murmured, his voice a low rumble. "Everyone who matters is already looking." He squeezed her waist, a possessive gesture. He felt untouchable. But across the room, a few older acquaintances exchanged knowing, disapproving looks. They remembered Eleanor, his wife of 22 years, the elegant, sharp-witted woman who had helped Lucas build his empire from the ground up, who had stood by him through bankruptcies and triumphs. Where was she tonight? The official story was a sudden, terrible migraine. Lucas had perfected the story. Eleanor was fragile. He'd say with a practiced sigh of concern. She couldn't handle these large crowds anymore. It was a lie that painted her as weak in him as a devoted, suffering husband. He relished the duality of it all, the public sympathy and the private indulgence. Chloe giggled at something he said. "This auction item is ridiculous. Who would pay $50,000 for a weekend trip to Napa?" "People with real money, sweetheart," Lucas replied, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Don't worry, you'll get used to it." Suddenly, a hush fell over a section of the crowd near the grand, ornate entrance. It was a subtle wave of silence, followed by a surge of frantic whispering. Heads turned. Lucas, sensing a shift in the room's energy, frowned and followed their gaze. And then he saw her. Eleanor. She stood at the top of the marble staircase, poised and radiant. This was not the frail, sickly woman he had described. She was a vision of fierce elegance. She wore a simple backless gown of deep emerald green that made her red hair look like fire. Her posture was ramrod straight, her chin held high, and on her face was not a trace of sadness or pain, but a calm, unshakable serenity. But it wasn't just her presence that froze the breath in Lucas's lungs. It was the man whose arm she held. He was tall, distinguished, with kind eyes and a confident ease. He leaned down and whispered something in Eleanor's ear, and she smiled, a genuine, beautiful smile that Lucas hadn't seen in years. The man was Alexander Xander Croft, a wildly successful and notoriously private tech philanthropist, a man whose integrity and actual net worth made Lucas Thorne look like a garish imitation of wealth. Lucas's world tilted on its axis. The glass of bourbon felt slippery in his suddenly numb fingers. Chloe's grip on his arm tightened, her nails digging into his sleeve. "Lucas, is that your wife?" she hissed, her voice laced with shock and a sudden, insecure fear. Lucas couldn't speak. He could only stare, his mind racing, trying to process the scene. The humiliation was instant and absolute. The whispers were no longer about his mistress. They were about him, the cuckolded husband, the fool who had underestimated his own wife. Eleanor's eyes scanned the room, as if looking for someone. They passed over Lucas without a flicker of recognition, without a hint of anger or pain. It was the most devastating thing of all. She looked straight through him as if he were a ghost. Then her gaze landed on someone else and she nodded, a small, acknowledging gesture, before she and Xander began their descent into the ballroom. Lucas stood frozen, the glittering party fading into a blur around him. The gilded cage he had built for Eleanor had just been swung open, and he was the one left trapped inside, exposed for everyone to see. Host, if you're captivated by Eleanor's stunning entrance, just wait until you see what happens next. Remember, subscribing and liking the video supports our channel and helps us tell more stories of incredible courage. Scene: the ballroom, moments later. The tension is palpable. The spell was broken by the clinking of a spoon against a crystal flute. The auctioneer, a jovial man named Bernard, blissfully unaware of the seismic social shift that had just occurred, took to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could all take our seats, we'll begin our live auction for the wonderful Children's Literacy Foundation. The crowd, snapping out of its collective stupor, began to migrate toward the round tables draped in white linen. The murmuring continued, a constant, buzzing undercurrent beneath the auctioneer's cheerful voice. Lucas Thorne was mechanically guided to his prime front-row table by a pale and anxious Chloe. He fell into his chair, his mind reeling. His carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time. He could feel the heat of 100 stolen glances. "Lucas, say something," Chloe whispered urgently, her earlier confidence replaced by a petulant panic. "This is humiliating. Why is she here? Who is that man?" "Be quiet," Lucas growled through gritted teeth, his eyes fixed on the auction podium, though he saw nothing. His mind was a storm of fury, confusion, and a deep, chilling fear. How had she found out? How long had she known? And Xander Croft? How did she even meet him? The questions looped endlessly, each one a hammer blow to his ego. At a table near the back, Eleanor and Xander were seated. They weren't hiding, but they weren't seeking attention either. They spoke quietly to each other, Xander pouring her a glass of water with a gentle, attentive smile. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple deeply comfortable and respectful of one another. It was a stark, painful contrast to Lucas's performative grip on Chloe's hand. The auction began. A vacation package, a signed jersey, a dinner with a celebrity chef. Lucas bid aggressively on a few items, not because he wanted them, but because it was a display of power, a desperate attempt to reassert his dominance in the room. He won a wine-tasting tour for 10, slamming his paddle down with a satisfying thud. He glanced toward Eleanor's table, seeking a reaction, a flinch, a look of regret. There was none. Then the final item was announced. And now the piece de resistance. Bernard boomed. A week-long, all-expenses-paid sailing excursion around the Greek Isles on a private 80-foot yacht. Donated anonymously, we start the bidding at $100,000. The room gasped, then erupted in excited chatter. This was a prize for the true elite. Lucas saw his opportunity. This was his moment. He would win this. He would show everyone, especially Eleanor, that he was still the top dog. The bidding flew fast between a telecom tycoon, a hedge fund manager, and Lucas. Soon, it was just Lucas and the telecom tycoon. $250,000. Lucas shouted, standing up, his face flushed. The tycoon, after a moment's thought, shook his head and smiled, conceding. Sold to Mr. Lucas Thorne for $250,000. Bernard announced, pointing his gavel at Lucas. The room broke into applause. Lucas puffed out his chest, a triumphant, vindicated smile finally returning to his face. He turned, expecting to see admiration, or at least Eleanor's defeated expression. Instead, he saw Xander Croft slowly raising his paddle. He hadn't bid the entire night. "Bernard," Xander said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the applause. "If I may—" The room fell silent again. The auctioneer beamed. "Mr. Croft, the floor is yours, sir." Xander stood up. He didn't look at Lucas. He addressed the room. "The Children's Literacy Foundation is a cause very dear to my companion tonight, Eleanor. In fact, it was her volunteer work there that inspired this donation. The yacht is mine." A fresh wave of whispers swept the room. She inspired the donation? So, Xander continued with a warm smile. "In the spirit of this wonderful cause, and because I'm a terribly competitive sailor, I'll see Mr. Thorne's $250,000 and raise it. I bid $500,000 to buy my own boat trip." The room erupted in laughter and thunderous applause. It was charming, self-deprecating, and unbelievably generous. But it was a nuclear-level social attack. Lucas had just been publicly and effortlessly outclassed. He hadn't just been outbid, he had been made a fool of. His win was instantly rendered pathetic and meaningless. He stood frozen, his triumphant smile now a grotesque mask of humiliation. The applause was for Xander's generosity, but it sounded to Lucas like they were applauding his defeat. He looked at Eleanor. For the first time that night, she was looking directly at him, and in her eyes, he didn't see malice or gloating. He saw something far worse. Pity, and then she gave him a small, almost imperceptible shrug, as if to say, "Look what you could have had." In that moment, surrounded by the deafening applause, Lucas Thorne felt completely and utterly alone. The unraveling was complete. The tension in that ballroom is absolutely electric. The public humiliation is one thing, but the private reckoning is about to begin. Stick with us to see how this powerful confrontation unfolds. And if you're loving the story of transformation, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Scene: the secluded outdoor terrace of the Everington. The sounds of the city are a distant hum. The air is cool. Lucas could no longer bear the pressure inside. The walls of the ballroom felt like they were closing in on him. Each laugh a dagger, each glance a judgment. He had to get out. He mumbled an excuse to a shell-shocked Chloe and practically fled through the French doors leading to the terrace. He leaned heavily on the cold stone balustrade, gulping the night air, trying to steady his racing heart. The scent of night-blooming jasmine did little to calm him. Running away so soon, Lucas? The party's just getting interesting. The voice, calm and familiar, came from behind him. He stiffened, then slowly turned around. Eleanor stood there, alone. The emerald gown seemed to absorb the moonlight, making her look both ethereal and formidable. She held a small clutch bag, her posture relaxed, as if she owned the very ground she stood on. "What is this, Eleanor?" Lucas's voice was hoarse, a mixture of anger and desperation. "What are you trying to prove? Parading around with Xander Croft? You're making a spectacle of yourself." Eleanor's laugh was soft, devoid of humor. "A spectacle? That's rich, coming from you. Tell me, Lucas, how is Chloe?" Her dress was certainly noticeable. "Don't," he warned, pointing a finger at her. "Don't you dare try to turn this around. You humiliated me in there." "I did nothing," she replied, her voice dropping to a steely calm. "I simply showed up. You humiliated yourself the moment you walked in with her. You did that all on your own. I just held up a mirror." Lucas took a step closer, his face contorted in confusion and rage. "Why? Why tonight? Why him? How long have you been planning this?" "Seeing him. Xander is a friend," she said, and the sincerity in her voice was undeniable. "A kind, respectful man who shares my interest in philanthropy. Something you never had time for, beyond writing a check for the tax break. And as for how long I've known about Chloe for 8 months, Lucas." The number hit him like a physical blow. 8 months. He had been living in his arrogant bubble, thinking he was so clever, so discreet. All the while, she knew. You followed me?" he stammered. "Please," she said, a flicker of her old wit surfacing. "I'm not a detective. You're just predictable. The late meetings, the new cologne, the password you changed on your iPad to her birthday." She shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. "You weren't as smart as you thought you were, and I wasn't as blind as you hoped." The truth of it all crashed down on him. This wasn't a spontaneous act of revenge. It was a meticulously executed conclusion to a story he had been writing for months, blind to the fact that she was reading every word. "Eleanor, He began, his bluster deflating, leaving only a hollow shell. "It was a mistake. It meant nothing." "She means nothing." "I know that," Eleanor said, her voice finally gaining an edge of emotion. "But I meant something. We meant something. Or we were supposed to. You didn't just cheat on me, Lucas. You dismissed me. You wrote me off as a fragile, boring wife who couldn't keep up with your glorious new life. You thought my world was so small that I wouldn't notice it was empty." Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't fall. They were tears of grief, not of weakness. Tonight wasn't about him. It was about me. It was about showing you and myself that I am still here, that I am not fragile, that my world is vast, and it will continue to be vast with or without you in it. Lucas was silent. He had no retort. Every weapon he had, denial, anger, blame, was useless against her quiet, devastating truth. She took a step back toward the lights and music of the ballroom. My lawyer will be in touch tomorrow. I think you'll find the prenup is quite clear about infidelity. Goodbye, Lucas. She turned and walked away, not with dramatic flourish, but with a final, resolute grace. She left him standing alone in the dark garden, surrounded by the sweet smell of flowers, the taste of his own medicine bitter on his tongue. The confrontation was over. He had lost. After a night of stunning revelations and a public reckoning, where do our characters go from here? This is where the true transformation begins. Get ready for an ending that focuses not on revenge, but on resilience and new beginnings. If this story has moved you, show your support with a like and a subscribe for more content like this. Scene, 6 months later. A bright, airy art gallery in a trendy Chicago neighborhood. The space is filled with light and people. The gallery opening was a vibrant, buzzing affair. On the walls were striking, emotionally charged photographs of everyday people in moments of quiet strength and connection. An elderly couple dancing in their kitchen, a single mother reading to her child, a young artist staring determinedly at a blank canvas. Standing near a large photograph of a stormy Lake Michigan, its waves crashing against the seawall with relentless power, was Eleanor. She looked different. The elegance was still there, but it was softer, more authentic. She wore a simple black dress and held a glass of wine, listening intently as an admirer discussed her work. The photography was hers. After the ballroom incident, which had indeed become legendary city gossip for a few weeks, Eleanor had retreated from the social scene entirely. She didn't give interviews or engage in the drama. Instead, she focused on the divorce, which was swift and, thanks to the prenup, decisive. She took her settlement and invested not in stocks, but in herself. She enrolled in photography courses, a passion she had abandoned decades ago to support Lucas's ambitions. She began volunteering more deeply with the Literacy Foundation, not just as a donor, but as a teacher. The photographs on the walls were the result of her journey, a visual diary of her rediscovery of the world and its people. Your use of light in this one is incredible, a voice said beside her. She turned and smiled. It was Xander. He wasn't there as a date, but as a genuine friend and patron of the arts. Thank you. It was a stubborn sunrise. I had to wait for hours in the cold for it to break through the clouds. Perseverance pays off, he said warmly. I'm so proud of you, Eleanor. This is all you. Across the room, unnoticed by the happy crowd, a man stood in the doorway. Lucas Thorne. He looked older. His suit was still expensive, but it hung on him slightly looser. His confidence was gone, replaced by a hesitant weariness. He had heard about the show through mutual acquaintances, his curiosity overpowering his shame. He watched Eleanor. He saw her easy smile, the way people gravitated toward her, the genuine respect in their eyes. He looked at her art, at the profound emotion captured in each frame. He saw a depth and a talent he had never truly seen or had never bothered to look for in all their years together. This was the life he could have had, this remarkable, resilient woman by his side, not as an accessory, but as a partner, not in a gilded cage, but in a sunlit gallery of her own making. He saw her laugh at something Xander said, and a pang of regret, so profound it was physically painful, shot through him. He had traded this for cheap validation and empty affairs. He had confused power for respect and possession for love. Eleanor's gaze eventually swept across the room and landed on him in the doorway. The smile didn't leave her face, but became polite, distant. She gave him a slow, measured nod, an acknowledgement, not an invitation. It was a final closure he hadn't known he was seeking. There was no anger left in her eyes, only peace. Lucas understood. He was part of her past, a subject she had once photographed in the darkroom of her life. And now she had developed a negative and moved on. He was a lesson she had learned, not a chain that bound her. He turned and walked out of the gallery, leaving the light and the laughter behind. He stepped out into the crisp Chicago afternoon, a solitary figure on the busy street. Inside, Eleanor turned back to her friends and her art. She took a sip of wine, her eyes scanning the room, not for threats or ghosts of the past, but for the next beautiful moment she might capture. The past was acknowledged. The present was vibrant. The future was a blank canvas. And for the first time in a very long time, she couldn't wait to fill it. A story of ultimate transformation. It shows us that sometimes the most powerful act is a revenge, but rediscovery. Eleanor didn't just leave a marriage. She found herself. What did you think of the ending? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Thanks for watching. Until next time.